when he shines, and to try to help him get back to that, it was like I was really, really rooting for him because I know what kind of positive impact that he can have on the world when he's really operating at his highest level. And if there was anything that we could do to try to get him back to it, we were going to do it.
Charles wanted to get me to the other side of the bank. I think back to me where I was rationalize it, a handle a day versus treatment. Which one, like I had to go to do the math. I took it to the money. I'm like, I did the math, and I'm like, it's cheaper than buying a handle a day. To circle back now, I want to help others who are in the same boat as I am, who struggles with their ego, who thinks that they know more or better than anybody else, who have more than enough money to do it. And it's a little different when it's financial, but so for the people who financially can't afford it, I can guarantee that what they're spending out there on substance, this is cheaper. So when I worked for GNC, John, one of the first things he told me, I used to write things down on fucking toilet paper and napkins because he would say things that would just be like, that's genius.
Yeah.
And he's like, like one of his statements is like, what gets measured gets done, measure twice, cut once, and then he'd say things like, he'd talk about quality, but I developed my own product. Well, he goes, Nick, you got to be able to make money in your sleep. You work time, you get paid for hourly. And I'm like, how can I make money in my sleep? How can I make money in my sleep? I'm for GNC. I'm like, and then all of a sudden it hit me. I'm like, I know everything about supplements. I know everything about vitamins and supplements. I'm like, I'll create my own product. It just so happened these guys were coming in the store, and they were off of Taylor or sure they were one of these streets down here, and they said they had a manufacturing plant, and they were looking at our labels and our packaging. And I said to them, oh man, I said, what do you guys do? They said, we manufacture supplements. I'm like, I want to know how they're made, and I wanted to see. I was curious about the process. Mm-hmm. They said, come over, and they were small at the time, and they had barrels. They were kicking barrels down the street. They had like 10 Mexican girls in the back, stuffing greens. They were doing greens, and they were encapsulating. And it fascinated me because I was a front of the store guy, and they were doing everything that got it for production. I'm like, well, I made my own product, and I showed it to John, and John goes, he looks at it, he goes, it looks like everybody else's. He's like, differentiation or die. Remember that? Jack Trout. I was like, okay, Jack Trout. He's like, this looks like the same thing. And at that time, ephedra was really big on the market. And he goes, you got everything that everybody else has in it. It doesn't. He goes, what I would do is like, I'd put your picture on the bottle. I go, isn't that arrogant? He goes, worked for me, didn't it? And then later on, after we worked out, because I trained him all the time. And I used to train him, and he goes, no, you know what? He goes, if your face is on the bottle, you're going to make sure that nothing in that pill kills anybody. And he goes, your integrity will go way up. And it was true. Mm-hmm. But it worked for me because, like, you have Gronk stuff on there. I got into the NFL solely, and all these players knew who I was. So I had guys like Gronk calling me, that knew my face and knew my image, and I was famous to them. And and it did. I mean, like, I didn't want to kill anybody. I couldn't sleep from, like, right now, I probably couldn't sleep because I was worried when I was selling all my supplements to the Miami Dolphins. I was worried that a player was going to get busted for doing some type of, they're going to do some, cocaine, and then they're going to blame me for it. Mm-hmm. So from June, July, August, because most people don't know this, the NFL tests in August and September. And it's a random test, but that's the only time they test. So you could do any drug all throughout, you'd be idiot to get busted.
Yep.
Because that testing is coming, but it's during training camp time. So if your skills aren't the league mentality, if your skills are not there during that time, then
You're gone.
you're gone.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, you know.
Yeah. Putting your face on a product or service, it's a funny idea, but just hearing that perspective, yeah, when you produce something, you need to be able to co-sign every time you produce that thing, whatever that service is. But I mean, we just rolled into it. So Charles,
Welcome to the Myself Wellness podcast, where we have our amazing founder and owner, Christina Thomas.
Hi.
And we have Nick Smith, who is a friend and an entrepreneur and a personal trainer and had his own supplement line. And I've known Nick for a while now. We're just going to kick it off and talk about Myself Wellness and your experience there and what brought you over to come see us. And we can talk about a bunch of other stuff.
I was the GM at Esporter Fitness, and something that Charles said to me was which was interesting. He said that he knew me, from being around town, and he wanted to introduce me to this this therapy, which is different for me because I'm a natural guy, a supplement guy, and I've been around the industry for a long time, which is it. But I was being prepped for it, and I felt like there was a calling for me to. I wouldn't have even entertained it, 5-10 years ago. I wouldn't even have looked at it, but it was in the right place at the right time because I came back from Utah, and I was in rehab. And if anybody knows me, I'm not a rehab guy, I was kind of tricked to go into rehab, but so I was open and went over and met with him and his wife. And
what did you need to recalibrate?
I think alcohol got away from me.
Interesting.
It got away from me. I didn't really start drinking until I was 30. I've never even done any drug besides alcohol, never done any drug. I think I smoked pot for the first time at 30. So I spent since I probably was 12, 13 years old, obsessed with nutrition, health, and fitness, reading from the start of watching Arnold Schwarzenegger, reading his first book in the Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, to watching Pumping Iron, to being obsessed with anything that was about fitness. And that resonated with me. So I'm a social person. So I would go out all the time and just being out. I started out trying to drink wine, trying to be fancy. I didn't even care the taste of it. I still don't. Beer or wine. That's why I always fought the whole thing about alcohol, because I'm like, I don't have an alcohol problem, because you could have beer or wine and I would never touch it. It's not that. But alcohol got away from me because, being out and being social and everybody, if you're the mayor of the town, everybody wants to buy you a drink.
Mm.
And then it became a coping mechanism. I went through a divorce, out every single night. And I literally remember going to a liquor store for the first time. And this was foreign to me. And buying liquor to bring home because I would go out and drink, I never brought it home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think pretty much was going through my divorce and fighting with my ex-wife about the kids and child support and all that other stuff. I think that's when alcohol became a big problem.
We've had discussions, obviously, on the first episode where it's you go through a phase where, like, I same like you, I didn't really do any drugs or alcohol until I was in college, and you don't recognize the power of habits. So at one moment, it's just, hey, this is making me feel good right now. And then the next moment, it's like, well, this is my neutralizer. It's like the thing that's going to reset me. It's a balance where it starts off as this is a one time, and then the one time becomes a habit. And then all of a sudden you're going like the same kind of story. But when I was struggling with smoking too much weed in college, it's like every kid, it's like you have something that you kind of over rely on. And the exact phrase that I would say is, it got away from me. Because at first I would just go to my buddy's house and we would smoke there. Then I bought my own weed and I'd smoke it at my house. And then I was like, all right, well, only when friends come over am I going to smoke. And then all of a sudden, it was the first thing in the morning and I was bored and I was like, what would happen if I just smoked right now? And then I was like, oh, wait, nothing. Nothing would happen. And then all of a sudden, that felt great in that moment. But then it became if I'm stressed, I got to go smoke right now. And it was this habitual thing that was ingrained into me. When was a moment for you that you were like, you know what, I have to understand this and I got to go fix this?
I never did. I had good people around me that saw it in me. And I think maybe my ego was too big. My ego was just like, I mean, even in rehab, they had a joke for me, like I would get up and I would say, I'm Nick, I'm a social drinker. And, I fought it all the way to the end. But it did get away from me, like I just, it was, the coping mechanism, it was the battle that I know that I needed help because I think it was the midst of my divorce and always being successful and wanting to win that it was easier to reach over and just grab that bottle in the morning and just guzzle it down.
Yeah.
I went to Esporta because it's right by our facility, and I was looking to find like a gym that was a little bit closer because I go to Naples Family Fitness a lot, and I knew Nick since I was a kid. Like I had seen him around town and stuff like that. And
Seen his face on bottles.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
and then I actually have a friend named Erica too that told me that Nick used to train her, and Erica had reached out to me and we were just talking about the therapies and stuff like that, and she was just like, I think my friend Nick could use this, right? And then another mutual friend of ours, Bianca, had mentioned like, she was friends with Nick and stuff like that, and she had actually said, hey, like my friend Nick, I really think that he might be able to use this.
Yeah.
And when I was getting to Esporta to do the tour of the gym, Nick's there and Nick's giving me the tour. and so like I was like, I was just kind of talking about what we do with the ketamine and my past, about how like, I had, issues with substance abuse and alcohol problems and stuff like that, and how like psychedelic medicines had come around and changed everything for me and saved my life. And through like our tour, we're kind of like, he's showing me the gym and we're chopping it up and we're talking about it. And by the end of the tour, he was just like, that sounds like something maybe I'd be like, that might be good for me too. And so, we had the conversation. I was like, listen, like come by the clinic and just take a tour. Like just come and like, let me show you around our place. And it was like, he was thinking about it and he was like, I don't know. And he wasn't really sure. And then after a while he came around and he was like, you know what? He's like, I actually think I'm ready to do this. And so when he came to the clinic, we got him to meet with Dr. Ferber and we started everything up. And
but he looked completely different then too. Like his eyes were red and he just was tired, and he's glowing now. Like he's totally looks different. Everything about him is just fundamentally different.
Yeah.
There's some fear of the unknown maybe. How did the process working with Charles help you work that back a little bit? How did you become confident in the decision?
Well, I think that if I can say, the universe was working its way on me. There was a lot of things. And the only way I can describe it today was in the back of my head that, this is going to be good for you. And the reservations, see, I didn't do what most people would do, is Google it. And then, the first thing that comes up, it was a party drug and all this other stuff. That's not where I was. Because if people look at that and the hesitance, you can't compare 1980s party drug to what they do, which is a clinic. So I think what overcome was, I get into the clinic, and I see, looks, the space is non-judgmental, man, and the space it's almost like a yoga loft or yoga studio, and you guys do ketamine treatment, you just feel like you're home and in a spiritual place. So that overcome the objection because I felt like I was kind of in a place for fitness,
Yeah.
And meeting Doc, he blew my mind with his wealth of background back into the 60s. The doctors just, I mean, I just thought I saw the pictures of him, you know. Who was the guy that he was with?
He lived with Osho for
Osho, yeah.
20 years. Yeah.
So I just think that you have to listen to your insides. You have to listen to what you need. And you have to just be open. You know, you can't Google it and try and research it.
When people do look up this stuff, all of these kind of negative things pop up. But then when you get to the clinic and you actually get to sit down and look at pictures of the neurological healing that's happening to the pathways, and then you start telling people about the increased dopamine levels. I mean, listen, like ketamine's really good for people that have, you know, alcohol issues, because when you drink alcohol, it releases massive amounts of dopamine into your brain, which makes you feel really, really good temporarily. But then it's a depressant. So after it runs out, then you feel depressed and you feel like not as good as you did before. Where ketamine's going in and it's turning those receptors on that create more dopamine naturally. So people start to feel really, really good without drinking. And then they're just like, wait a second, I feel really, really good. I don't really feel like drinking anymore. It's kind of like just this constant thing that seems to happen with people that when they're going through these treatments.
There was a study that was done about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, that said people with alcohol use disorder, they gave them ketamine, and 86% of the participants stayed sober 6 months after they were treated with ketamine.
Yeah.
So that's attributed to, and I'd love to get your perspective on it. What was it like? I want to go into the actual treatment a little later on in the episode, but once the treatment was over, where did you find that release now that alcohol wasn't attractive at that point? Where did you get your sense of like, I got to release what I'm feeling right now? I'm feeling, whether it was emotion or excitement or happy, whatever the feeling that used to trigger, okay, I need to go get a drink. How would you trade that off?
Well, you know, you know how after a workout you have that norepinephrine and you have that adrenal rush.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for me it was, and you know, they would listen to me because I was coming out of it, and I mean, I'm sure I was just blabbing on. I mean, I literally felt like I had a workout.
He looked like he had one though too. Like he had a pump after, and huge.
He came out of one of his treatments and he was like jacked. And he was just like, does this stuff like help build muscle too?
Yeah, I thought they were giving me steroids or something. I was like, what is this? Because I literally felt like I went through a workout. My brain was like, I mean, that norepinephrine, man, that adrenaline rush was like, I'm like, this is like working out, you know, and I can't say that's going to be for everybody, but that's the industry. That's what I spent my whole life in. And it went to that part of me. And I was like literally pumped. I mean, my arms was pumped. My body was feeling like I'm like, you know, this is a workout. So immediately I was just blown away, you know, like, and I was trying to tell them, I mean, I don't know if they understood what I was saying, but I mean, I'm like, look at my arms, I felt like I worked out for an hour.
It looked like you did.
And
Yeah.
So then when you got out of, when you went home, what was the next couple of days like? What was it like to kind of like process what it all had happened?
Well, I mean, for me, I went into the spiritual. I mean, at first, I mean, I saw these, you know, like when I was a kid, you had these little green army men that, you know, the little stick figures. I saw them growing up on the wall. I saw Charles on the other side of the bank, and he was in Indian gear, and he was with a whole bunch of Indians on the other side, and I thought that they were hostile, and it was the whole part of this, and I mean, it's crazy. I thought that they were trying to, you know, like they were trying to kill me, but they were trying to help me get to the other side of the bank. So I literally, and if you think about a bank, I mean, you know, a bank, and there's currency, you know, and it's like money, and I'm trying to get to the money. And I was trying to get to the money, and they were trying to help me with a canoe to get on the other side. And he was in war paint and everything, but they were trying to help me.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get over to the other side.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
Symbolic,
That's
man.
really
Yeah.
symbolic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was during the treatment that
That's
you were going
happened
through?
during the treatment.
Wow.
after that one was done, I was giving him a ride home that day, and he's like, after, like, it was. I think he said, like, did you make it to the other side or whatever? He said we were.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were like standing like on the bank together, looking out, and like in the session, he was like, "We're gonna heal all of that. Like, we're gonna heal everybody out there." And it was like those, like, so he had like made it to the other side, and now like we were gonna be on a team that was gonna end up helping everybody heal.
So why is this so important? One of the most frustrating parts of hearing these stories is the fact that there are so many forces working against this being out in the mainstream media. I mean, we're the media partners, and we're seeing the outside frustration of Instagram, these other social platforms really not want to promote this. They don't want people to know that they can be freed of so many shackles. What would you say to people that are on the fence, that were in your shoes, and why is this such an important part of the journey?
Well, you know that. I mean, the naysayers. I mean, anything that the Food and Drug Administration. You have the all the drug companies. Everybody's fighting for that dollar, and everybody's looking for it. So people always have something to say about something, and I would think that it is because people because it was used on the streets in the 80s and in the 90s, and I've heard about it as Special K, that they're wrapping themselves around that, and then it's a blockage. Don't say anything more.
Do you know, did I ever tell you guys, I made a post on TikTok and I threw up some glitter, and what I wrote was, when a client calls you and tells you they got off of 11 different medications, and our TikTok page got ripped down.
Yeah.
I didn't say ketamine. I didn't say we got them off medications. I just said somebody told me we got them off 11 medications. Bam, gone.
Oh, I have a beautiful story to kind of drive home the point of the state of pharmacology. Now, my mom works in Western medicine. I'm at no way saying that there's any problems with. There's definitely problems with Western medicine. Let me back up. There's 100% problems, but I have somebody that I know who is going through. She was basically. They told her that she was bipolar. They told her that she had all these things wrong with her mental state. Now, my personal opinion, I knew her. She's a close friend of my fiance. She wasn't getting outside. She wasn't getting sunlight. She wasn't taking care of her body, like feeding it the right nutrients, exercising, all these things. Yet she's going to a psychiatrist that's like, okay, we're going to just throw all these crazy drugs at you. We're going to give you a bipolar drug. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. I think she's been in that process for a year and a half. She is on a drug right now that made her whole face break out in rashes. So now very good looking woman, now has lost all of her confidence because she has these insanely blotchy skin, all these problems. And it was to solve a problem that I, honest to God, think was just a chemical imbalance of eat the right foods, go outside. And there's the layers and layers and layers. And now she's on 4 medications to solve one problem.
Yeah. See, I love the fact that you're bringing this up.
Mm-hmm.
And like, here's a crazy part, right? Here's a crazy tidbit of information about ketamine and like why I don't understand what's going on, or I do kind of understand what's going on, is that you take any pharmaceutical psych med, or even like any pharmaceutical medication that's FDA approved out there, right? It's like the antidepressant commercials that come on TV, and you watch this commercial and everybody is happy, and they're running in fields and stuff like that, smiling. And then at the end of it, the screen pops up and there's a scroll that basically says like, might cause rectal bleeding and might cause suicidal ideation, or you might die from taking this, right? And almost all of the pharmaceutical medications out there have a scroll of possible negative side effects out there. Now, when you go back to ketamine, the only really negative things that you see about ketamine are that it was a party drug, or that it was special K, or you don't want to go into a K hole, or things like that. But we're talking about one of, if not the safest, least toxic anesthetics on the market, with minimal side effects, meaning like the only side effects you might have from it is if you abuse it recreationally all the time, and it can be hard on your kidneys, or it might cause some nausea after you're done with a treatment, or if they give it to you for surgery or something like that, but you have anti-nausea medication, and then there's a slight spike in your blood pressure. But like, you know, as long as you don't have uncontrollable high blood pressure or something like that, it's not going to be an issue. So we're talking about a medication that's getting people off of the ones that have 50 harmful side effects that literally have almost no negative side effects.
What was your experience? Has he gone through all the treatments?
Yeah, no, he went, yeah.
So what was the first experience? When I've talked to people about it, it's intense. And as somebody that's like who we talked to, Zane, who we talked to, he had experience with recreational psychedelics and things like that. Yeah. And even he said it was incredibly intense. What was that like the first time versus the next couple times that you participated in it?
You know, every time was a different journey. Again, it was with ketamine was I went on a different path because you know I'm stubborn. You know, it takes me a while to take to something, but ketamine, it worked. I mean, my experience always came out the same. Like on the ride over, Charles, when I was talking about, you know, like the Ozempic, you know, like everybody's losing, you know, they're losing weight and there's the side effects. I said, this is the opposite of, when I called him the other day, I said, this is the opposite of the Ozempic. It makes me feel like I went through a workout. I mean, it literally goes to your brain and tells your brain what it needs to do in order to fix yourself. So it was like it brought, and we talked about this, I felt like I was gaining my old friend back, my old self. Like this guy I knew, you know, 20 years ago, like your old best friend comes back into town.
Wow.
And it was bringing my old best friend back. And I'm like, man, I every single time I was, you know, but I was still trying to fight it because I wanted the other force of the alcohol and all the other stuff. But it was every time I went to the clinic, it was like, it was good to see my old friend back, you know, which was myself.
I love
But
that.
that's so,
Yeah,
that's so powerful. When that happens, did you have to become reacquainted with your old self? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, because then there's that self-talk. It's like, hey, Nick Smith, you know better than this. You can't drink before you go to do the ketamine treatment. You know.
We sent him home a couple of times because like he smelled like alcohol.
Yeah.
And it's not safe for us to treat him. And
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's that's a hard thing, that's a hard beast to get rid of. You know, I was telling Nick on the way over here, I'm like, when he was talking about my old friends back, and then he was giving me a comparison of, and we couldn't remember the person from the Snoopy show, but like the guy who was walking around with the clouds and the storm, like consistently walking over him. One time when I went to detox, because I got mandated to go there, and I was taking so many benzos, and
I think his name was Charlie.
no, not Charlie Brown.
Not Charlie Brown?
No, it was
His friend.
it was
I know who you're talking about.
yeah, but it was the one who like walked with the storm going over him. And I was, you know, under the influence of so many things that when I finally detoxed, it's like I came back. Like it was like there was only like, it was like the Charles shell, but like I wasn't operating the wheel anymore. And like it was kind of like I was on autopilot because I was on so many different substances. And when I had that moment of clarity, and I was just like, holy crap, I'm back. And I remember I had asked my mother, I'm like, how long was I out there for? And she was like, 6 months. And I had no idea, because like I was basically on autopilot for a lot of it. And it's like when I actually was me again, like I knew exactly what he was talking about, because it's like you feel like it's you and you're just going and you're going through the motions or whatever. But when you actually finally get that moment of clarity back when you are substance free, you're just like, oh man, this is me. It's like that friend that he hadn't seen in a long time that was finally back in his life.
I think we talked about this on the last podcast, but we have something called the shadow, which is like our old representation of ourself. That is when we go through life, society, school, workplace, stuffs that person down here. So it means that when for instance, I used to have a little bit of like anger flare ups when I was in high school and when I was in middle school. And I get super angry and I'd express it. And then when I was around friends, they'd be like, oh, you know what I mean? Like I would get the feedback of that's not acceptable here. So then I would stuff that part of myself away. What I've realized is there's so many parts of ourselves that we don't even know exist anymore because we're running in circles of
So we're programmed.
exactly. And so I now realize that shadow, that part of myself isn't bad necessarily. It's not necessarily good to, if all of a sudden I was on this podcast like, fuck this, and I just threw everything and I ran out, that wouldn't be the best thing. But it allowed me to be comfortable with all sides of my personality, the good, the bad, the ugly, in its true form. What was that like for you when you became reacquainted? Did you have to, how did you work yourself through the self-love component of it?
Well, I can be a very regimented and disciplined guy. Like I can flip the switch, and and just start training. And that self-talk. Whereas you can't do that drinking. You can't do that, and you're touching on a deeper part of me, and that opens up to. So I about 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, I onset epilepsy, and it happened when I was flying. I was flying with I feel like he's my big brother, the guy that founded a pizza chain called Papa John's. We were flying over to Miami, and we were going up to Okeechobee, and when we flew over, I was showing off, on Facebook and social media, and so we had to take the jet, and we took a helicopter over to Okeechobee from the private airport, and I was trying to post on Facebook and just show off I'm on the jet, I'm on the helicopter, and it was for Rick Scott, who was the governor then, and he was running for Senate, and it was a fundraiser. We didn't want to stay 5 hours for those long dinners and everything, so we flew back, and we went to Capitol Grill to go get an appetizer, and then we walked over to Blue Martini, and I ran into a buddy of mine who was a doctor that we saw at skiing in Park City, and he was going through something with his wife, and I ran back over, and I said, John, do you realize that my buddy who was a doctor over, I said, I just saw him, and he's and he's going through some stuff with his wife, and I was trying to tell him what was going on, and I was animated and excited, and all I remember was saying the doctor, you remember the doctor that's over there, the black guy that's a doctor we saw in Park City, and John was like, who? And then I dropped. And all I remember was waking up to the ambulance, and they were loading me into the ambulance, and John was pushing my leg on that gurney thing, and I was trying to fight these guys, and I was like, I don't want to go to the hospital, and they were like, they were trying to put everything on. I'm trying to rip everything off. I'm like, I can't go to the hospital. I wasn't even born in a hospital. I hate hospitals. And they're like, and something the guy said, he's like, you almost died, and I kind of just, and I let them take me in. This was new. I got the lights, and I'm in an ambulance. And when we got to the hospital, I wasn't scared. I was just like, let's go, let's get out of here. I was sore. I had my first seizure. And I didn't get scared until I saw the look on John's eyes, and it's like, and he was scared. And at the same time, my personality is a joking personality. I was trying to, and then all of a sudden I realized that the situation might have been serious. And I bit my tongue and I was bleeding, I was bleeding because when you have seizures, you bite your tongue and, and the doctor was like, he wanted to test me for everything. Little did I know that, he was like, John was like, I don't care what it costs, do everything. So they're doing spinal taps, they were poking me and prodding me, and they're doing every single thing. And I'm like, is all this stuff necessary? And they admitted me into the hospital. It was, and then the doctor was like, when they call practicing medicine, it is practicing medicine because this guy saw Papa John and he saw, he wanted to run that bill up, and he's like, hey, man, do you think I can get his autograph? I was like, fix me, man. Fix me, motherfucker. Forget about John, fix me. You got a doctor asking me for his autograph, and I'm here dying. And this was all new. Hate hospitals. And I was admitted into the hospital, and I had to go through that. So so going through that process of suffering from seizures, and that it didn't just happen once, it kept on happening. And so I was forced to try to figure out how to get out of this hole. And I thought I could cure myself. I thought I could cure myself. And it got so bad that I had to go on medical leave. I mean, I worked for myself, that all my private clients, all the private jets and all the helicopters and everything else, like, washed up. I had to go back to flying commercial. And you can't have a seizure in a hospital, can't have a seizure in the airport, it just doesn't, so flying commercial. And then I couldn't run my business anymore. I couldn't run my private business. So I had to go back to work, and so I decided to go back to work for GNC because I thought I could cure myself. And then I had 3 surgeries at GNC, and they forced me to go on medical leave. So everything was pushing me back to, I had to find a way. I had to find something, some type of different modality, something different that would help me.
So what I would like to ask you, and it's kind of like for everybody that's listening too, that might be going through something similar to this, you not feeling comfortable and not liking being in hospitals, how was our place for you, for somebody that isn't comfortable with being in a medical setting like that?
You stole my question.
Really? I'm sorry. So, like, did it feel like you were in a medical facility like that when you came to our place, or was it more like a day spa kind of feel? And
Yeah, no, the ambiance, when I was building my first studio, I didn't want it to look like a fitness studio. I didn't want it to feel like the whole sterile environment of a gym. I wanted a waterfall, at the front, a running waterfall. I wanted you to come into the environment that you didn't feel judged. And open space, beanbag couches, you felt like you were definitely getting ready to be in a place where, like I said, it's like you feel like you're in a yoga studio. You feel like you're in a yoga studio, non-clinical, non-medical, not hospital foods, not that sterile environment.
that's it. And
You feel like you're at home.
I appreciate that because and Christina did an amazing job of making all of that happen.
Yeah, no, I think when you Google ketamine and you Google ketamine treatments, it can be really scary because you see all these places that are stark and cold and silver trays by this uncomfortable looking chair. And it's just all these IV stuff, and it can be scary. I looked at a place in Fort Myers, and I was like, "Who would go there?" I mean, they had a 1-star review on Google, but but it was terrifying. It looked like you were just going there to give blood work, or it's not comfortable. To really let go, you have to feel comfortable in every sense of the way, and I really feel like we do a very good job of that because it's
I
like
forgot.
your living room.
I forgot. I told you that I actually did go. Me and my girlfriend at the time, we did go, which is a place that is literally right across the street from you.
They're closed.
They're closed.
Yeah, yeah, which was right across the street for you, and that was when I was working for GNC. So that was, and this is a year or 2 years later and immediately when I felt like I was at a doctor's office, like you were going to go, you were at a doctor's office. That's the first thing I felt. And then you see people hooked up to the machines, like they're going getting, with the IVs, you look like you're at, you were getting dialysis.
Yeah.
Those were the two thoughts that I had.
So
I had,
Nick's talking about another ketamine clinic that he had went to like a
Yeah.
couple of
Yeah.
years before, thinking about
I,
considering.
yeah, I went there just to check it out. And I was like, um, and the first thing I thought, like, you're going to a dialysis clinic or you're in a doctor's office, and everybody knows that feeling of being in a doctor's office, sitting there waiting, And then when you see people hooked up to machines, like you look like you're having a kidney dialysis. I felt like I was at a spa when I
Yeah.
walked in.
Well, I'd like to say you feel like you're going on a journey when you walk in there.
Yeah.
You do. Like you walk in and you feel like you're about to be taken on a journey. I remember when we got our card, going in Dr. Ferber's office, I was just like, wow, I feel you do. Like you feel like at all the walls that you had built up personally, that the environment just starts to tear them down one by one. Like all your ego, all these different parts of your brain that are spiking when you're out in day-to-day life are just slowly torn down when you guys walk in your facility, which is hard to do with four walls and paint.
Try to fight the medicine. But the real way, like in Dr. Ferber will say it, and I love mimicking him, he's like, let go is the way. And so basically you just like, it's like this meditative state. It's like completely surrendering to the experience and letting the medicine take you and showing you what you need to see, or taking you in the actual trip and going where you need to go. Because like a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but every once in a while we'll get somebody that does a treatment, and after they get the medicine, they're like trying to fight that disassociation where the medicine takes you into those psychedelic experiences. But Nick was really like, he just got in the chair and he was ready to roll kind of when it happened.
Yeah, mine was different because after the first treatment, like I said, I think that all cylinders started to fire, like the norepinephrine. So, my adrenaline pump, and then physically, my body was pumped. I mean, I was like, so I was on, each treatment is different, and there's different parts of you that you work off. Like the first part was me trying to get to the other bank, and then the next phase of it was trying to figure out, how do I continue? How do I stay in this space? But fighting it wasn't necessarily my thing, but yet ego is mine, like it was afterwards. It was him, having that tough love with me, is like, you're not going to go home and, after this and drink on this, So it was coming back. It was because we still want to tie ourselves to our addiction. I can't believe I said that, addiction, because, we want to tie ourselves back. We want to go back to that crutch. But what I think that they do is that they bring, which is hard to do, they bring that love atmosphere, that non-judgmental space to you that is inviting, is like, you're fucking up, but you don't feel like that. It's like, let's get you back in, let's get you back on another, let's get you another treatment, let's figure this out together. So,
And that's you didn't feel like you were in a space of judgment.
I didn't feel like I was in space of judgment, but it was my ego. Each treatment made my ego lesser and lesser and lesser. It was my ego that was the fight part, because that was me. I mean, I was like, I'm Nick Smith. I'm like, I can figure this out myself. Not necessarily like my image, like I think big of myself, but I always think that I can do it myself. And
Yeah, I get it. Listen, like that was, Nick's an intelligent person, and a lot of people that go through similar things to what we went through with alcohol and stuff like that, we're intelligent people, and we always think that we can outsmart things, or like, I'm smarter than this, I can figure it out, or if I only have a drink then I'll stop by this time. And it's like, it always beat me. And in the end, I might trick myself a couple of times, and then I would always end up getting my butt kicked again. And
You always think you know best.
yeah, and I'm still working on that. Just mine. minus the substances, but but it's like, listen, with what Nick was talking about too, is like there is no judgment when people come to see us. Like we don't like listen, like from like I don't judge anybody. I've been through a lot. And the fact is that all we really care about is doing our best to be there for people and helping them and wanting what's best for them and wanting them to be the best version of themselves and stuff like that. And the truth is like people do stumble, people do fall. Listen, like and we talked about that on the last show. It's like it's not about stumbling and falling. It's the ability to pick yourself, brush yourself off and keep on going forward. Like that's where the real warrior's heart comes from.
And maintaining a self-love through that process as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that you have instilled into me, and I've taken a lot of what you guys teach at the clinic and applying the reason why I think everybody needs to go and experience what you guys experience, whether you're going to go through a treatment or not, understand the basis of it all, which is love. And what you guys have taught me specifically is that self-love component. If you're missing that, doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter what you go through, because you don't believe that you deserve to not be inhabited by a substance and not like believe that you are more than who you are and getting reaccustomed to your older self, the person that you hold in such high regard. So it's starting with love. Did you feel that when you went through it? Did you feel the connection to love that people talk about?
Yeah, I mean, especially I think there was one treatment that that they came in and they said we gotta breathalyze you. Even through that part,
Mm-hmm.
like you're thinking they're mad at me, I let them down, and it was none of that. It was like, and then Doc came. I had to go see Doc, and it's like going to the principal office. But then he's sitting, in his yoga stance with his legs crossed, and he's sitting there and is like, "How can I help? How can I help you?" And he just opened it up. He's like, "What can I do to help you?" It wasn't, "What are you doing? Why would you drink before you got here? What do you, none of that. It was like from staff till like, okay, we can't treat you today, but we still love you. And then maybe let's talk about this. And I sat with him, and I sat with Doc, and we just sat for an hour and we just talked, and how it's if your parents yell at you and scream at you, but when they tell you that they're disappointed in you, it makes you want to be better. It makes you want to do good. It makes you want to say, "Hey, all right, knock it off, Nick. Let's get back to who you are."
I love that.
I think that's one of the listen, I want to see everybody succeed when we treat them. It's why we do what we do. I really wanted it for him.
Mm-hmm.
Just because growing up, I had I didn't know Nick then, but I knew who he was. I mean, everybody knew who Nick was. Everybody had tons of respect for him. He was probably the best trainer in Naples, Florida, and was training, celebrity athletes and all kinds of stuff. And, to see how when he shines, and to try to help him get back to that, it was like I was really, really rooting for him because I know what kind of positive impact that he can have on the world when he's really operating at his highest level. And if there was anything that we could do to try to get him back to it, we were going to do it.
So what's next for you now?
For me now, it's when we got to take it to the money. It was like Charles wanted to get me to the other side of the bank,
Mm-hmm.
So, but then he touched on something that I now vaguely remember. I wanted to help. I want to help others. And like people, they will, like I was talking to a guy at the gym the other day, and he's like, "Oh man, I can get, I can take it, I can get it on the street." And I go, I said, "I know what you're thinking. You can self-medicate." I said, I try to do that. And he's like, "Oh man, it cost." And this is a guy that needs a treatment. And I said, I think back to me where I was rationalize it. I was rationalized. I was like, well, I can, okay, the cost. I said, well, you know, you know, a handle a day, is versus treatment. Which one, like I had to go to do the math. I took it to the money. I'm like, I did the math, and I'm like, it's cheaper than buying a handle a day. Um, and so for what's there for me now is like when I called Charles, I said, "Hey man, I'll come work for you for free." I still have my business and my supplement line, and am rebuilding my brand. But what to circle back now, I want to help others who are in the same boat as I am, who struggles with their ego, who thinks that they know more or better than anybody else, who have more than enough money to do it. And it's a little different when it's financial, but who have, so for the people who financially can't afford it, I can guarantee that what they're spending out there on substance, this is cheaper than the substance.
Well, listen, but so like Rogan talks about this, and he says there's different kinds of like drugs or things that people self-medicate with out there, right? And you got like, alcohol and opiates and like, meth or something. And like a lot of these drugs can be very harmful for you, and they're really just numbing things at the end of the day. Where then you have drugs that are like psychedelics or ketamine, and what that's doing is it's actually like it's healthy for you. It's doing neurological healing. It's helping you get to the root issues of the trauma that you've gone through, so you can actually process these things. And when people are self-medicating with ketamine on the streets, they're not doing it in a therapeutic dosing protocol. The set and setting isn't proper. They're not really getting what they need to. Their intention isn't really probably right. And so now it can also become another crutch. And this is where you'll hear of people actually getting addicted to ketamine. Like, oh, isn't ketamine addictive? And it's not addictive like heroin, where it's very physically addictive, but it can become very mentally addictive for people because now it's the crutch that they're relying on. Now, listen, during some of the interviews that I've done in the past, I get asked the big question. So, do you think that you could treat somebody that's addicted to ketamine with ketamine to get them off of the ketamine? And I always said, you know what? I actually think you could. And the reason being is because they're not doing it in a therapeutic way. They're using it as a form of escape. And if they came into a clinic like ours with the intention of healing and actually sat down in the chair and let themselves disassociate and process the underlying issues of why they're self-medicating with the ketamine, I bet you we could do it. You ready for this? We just did it. So we actually just treated our first person that was addicted to ketamine, and they were using it as a form of escapism. And now, through the process of their ketamine treatments, they threw away all of the ketamine that they had at home because they went and they were going to try to use a little bit of it, and they felt like it wasn't right anymore. And so they got rid of
Feel
all of their
guilty about it.
ketamine, and now they're not using ketamine anymore because of doing ketamine therapy with us.
Going a little deeper on that, when I sat down and talked to Dr. Ferber, when we had the discussion about weed, we've had this discussion in many different frames, but it's the intentionality behind it. And Joe Rogan was on a podcast with Tom Segura where they talked about the idea of, is it a crutch or is it a tool? Is it a crutch versus a tool? And it's all about intention. So he was talking about the funny story of him waking up in the morning and like starting off with the joint. And he was like, hey, he was telling this, and that's not a great public service announcement for people, but he said, I did it. And my trigger was, I'm not going to go scroll on social media and get lost into a tidal wave of social media. He went and started writing. So he used this thing that most people use as a crutch, as a tool. And so that's a great tie into what you're talking about, where, yes, ketamine has the propaganda around it but it's all about the intentionality. And that's why you guys have invested so much into the facility, so much into all the steps of service that you guys have in terms of setting you on the right path versus just giving you a drug and saying, hey, have fun.
Yeah, that's really what does set us apart. And we talk about it all the time about at-home ketamine clinics and the accessibility to that. And it's really going to cause an epidemic of people just going and ordering ketamine online and telehealthing it. But it's not, at the end of the day, is it harming you or is it helping you?
There's a study that came out and it actually was collecting data and it showed evidence that over 50% of the ketamine that's being sent to home for people to use at their house for home ketamine is being abused and not used properly. And so like this can be a real issue, and this is one of the reasons why we never took part in this, not just because other things could go wrong, but because potentially we didn't want to create another crutch for anybody. And so like we don't send ketamine home with people. There's every once in a while, if somebody has Parkinson's, we came up with a protocol because we treated a couple people that had Parkinson's disease and they would go tremor free for like a number of days after they did a treatment. And one lady hadn't been able to take her pills orally with water for like 2 years. Like they had to crush them up and like feed them to her and stuff. And for the next 5 days, she could take her medications and wasn't shaking and stuff like that. So in that one instance or that scenario, Dr. Ferber can write a prescription for a nasal spray that if somebody goes into an active tremor, a loved one can administer the medication and it'll pull them out of the tremor. But like other than that, we don't send the medicine home with people.
Yeah. So to wrap.
Wait, before we wrap really quickly, are there any other super profound or interesting experiences that you had on the medicine that you want to talk about?
That was literally going to be my next question. That's awesome.
Well, besides my Ozempic reverse, that loses weight and then it gives you a pump, let's see, coming out of it, you come out somewhat in a haze. But then when the clarity, being clear, being fully conscious and being aware of your surroundings, and actually, that is the best part of it. You said, my eyes was always red,
Always.
and like, I don't know if anybody figured out who that Charlie Brown, the guy in Charlie Brown with the pig pen. I thought it was pig pen. So just imagine that cloud over your head, pig pen, and imagine that cloud with that lightning storm just being gone away.
What about the actual trips? So like the one experience you had where you saw me as an Indian standing on the other side of the creek or whatever, or the current or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But what about like, were there any other actual experiences that were super profound? Like, did you like any interdimensional?
Yeah,
traveling
when you feel yourself as matter and you realize that you're not. This world definitely is a 3-dimensional world. We could be living another life. That's what really opened it up to me, because I've never experienced that. Like I said, I've never done any psychedelic drug, and I've never done any drug. I think I smoked pot once or twice, like at 30, and then, but it never did anything. I'm from Jamaica, so I guess it was already ingrained in the system. It felt like smoking a cigar. I didn't feel anything, and pot doesn't do it for me, you know. But I felt like myself being molecules. You really feel like yourself dissipating and disappearing. If you look at the color red and black, there's frequency. We think that this is genius, that people are able, this whole AI thing, and colors have frequency and they have wavelengths. I felt myself disappear into nothing, and I felt like myself rebuilding back to being a person, like each molecule was being combined, and my body was being reformulated into being a person, spiritually first. And then it's like how, like in the Bible, it says that, God his breath created man. And when you look at, you look at Thomas Edison, everybody thinks that what he did when he created the record was genius. But it basically was him taking a tinfoil piece of can and saying Mary had a little lamb, and they rolled it on a little spin wheel, and with the tinfoil, it made that impression, and that impression created the where they were able to rewind it back, and it was like Mary had a little lamb, and no one thought that it could be done, but it was by breath, and that's what I felt like. Is like, well, basically, ketamine was like breathing life into me again.
Well, that's one hell of a way to fucking send it off.
Testimonial.
That's a great testimonial. Guys, where can they find you? Where can they find your podcast? Where can they find your location? Just so that we have that out there for everybody.
So our website is myselfwellness.com. You can contact us at 239-908-9958. Our address is 3541 Bonita Bay Boulevard in Bonita Springs, Florida. And we're ready to help you on your healing journey if you're ready to take the leap. All good things start with the leap of faith.
This is a podcast about wellness and like what kind of healthy lifestyle practices that people are doing to take themselves to the next level of their lives, man. So it's like, it doesn't even have to specifically be psychedelics or anything. It's like, what are you doing in your life that's taking you to the next level? What healthy lifestyle practices are you implementing in your daily life to take you to be the highest version of yourself?